So some pros about cordwood is that you can use relatively small diameter pieces of wood, and you can use wood that is kind of waste wood. Like, it's definitely really flexible as long as you're using a species that is some sort of softwood, and you don't want to use wood that is already partially decomposed. Cordwood can be really fun to do with a group. It can be really not fun to do by yourself because it's a lot of work. There's thermal mass on each side of the chinking, and so that thermal mass on the inside of your building can be really helpful for that building holding heat. It can make it a little harder to heat up initially, but it's really good for holding heat. The cordwood structures are relatively well insulated as long as they don't have big cracks in them. And it's also really great for carbon sequestration, just like I was talking about with log cabins. So there's definitely some cons with cordwood. So one is, like I was mentioning, that wood can shrink and swell, and that can cause crumbling of the material, the masonry or cob that you're doing in between your logs. So that can be a major issue. It can cause crumbling, or it can just cause gaps. So that's not that great. Also, the end grain of every single piece of wood is exposed to the weather with cordwood if you're not covering it with plaster, and that's really not good. Like, the wood is much more vulnerable to rot and to insect infestations in its end grain. And log cabins, like, there definitely is end grain exposed, but the relative amount of end grain exposed versus the rest of the wall system is way less with log cabins than it is with cordwood. Cordwood is extremely labor intensive. That's why it's great to have a lot of people helping you if you're going to be building a cordwood structure. I would be curious to see what proportion of cordwood structures have been built during natural building classes or intensives, because it's just so much work. And it's pretty cheap to build if you're building it by yourself, but if you are going to be hiring people to help, it's going to be very expensive because of the labor involved. And yeah, like I've said before, there are lots of wood mortar interfaces, and that's just kind of bad news in general. If you've ever done any earthen plaster or even earthen paint, let alone cob that's interfacing with wood, like, that's always a vulnerable point, and the cordwood structure is just having that happen like everywhere all the time. So definitely a big con. So to sum up the pros and the cons of cordwood, the pros are, one, that you can use small pieces of wood. You can use wood that's of small diameter and wood that otherwise wouldn't really have a building purpose. It's really fun to do with a group. There is a lot of thermal mass on the inside of the building. It's a relatively well insulated wall system, and you can sequester a lot of carbon in the wall. As far as cons go, the movement of wood can cause cracks and crumbling. The end grain of the wood is exposed. It's extremely labor intensive, and it's expensive if the labor is not done by the homeowner. And there's a lot of wood mortar interfaces.